I'd like you to try a thought experiment with me. Think of a time when you remembered something that you had previously forgotten. Maybe it was something small. Maybe it was something big. Was it a good thing? Maybe a warm childhood memory, a family experience, a beautiful moment in nature, a line from a book that touched you, things you had completely forgotten about. And then somehow something triggered that memory and the moment came rushing back. Or perhaps your mind went somewhere else. Maybe the thing that you had forgotten and then remembered was a painful memory, even a traumatic one. And similarly, something or someone forced that moment which had been lying dormant in the recesses of your brain to come barreling to the surface. Whatever your remembered, forgotten moment, think about how it made you feel. Was it good to remember? Did the happy memory make you happy to recall it? Or sad that the moment was the thing of the past? Did the painful memory, if it was a painful memory, compound the pain that you once felt? Or did you realize that you had more space, more resilience to hold that moment in your mind without it unmaking you as the original experience once did? This week I was listening to a podcast in which the host was interviewing Dr. Raquel Euclides, the head of collections of the National Library of Israel. It's a regret of mine that during my recent trip there, I did not have time to visit what's supposed to be an extraordinary new space for the library, which now 130 years old was one of the first Jewish institutions created in pre-state Palestine. Dr. Euclides was reflecting on the dialectic, the tension between remembering and forgetting. The library, she explained, is the institution for the collective memory of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. It's our mission to document and collect, preserve, and make available our history, our culture, our society in the high points and in the depths of our worst moments. Because of this mission, immediately following October 7th, the library began to document and catalog materials from this extraordinary and extraordinarily challenging moment in Jewish and Israeli history. But Dr. Euclides also had something interesting to say about forgetting, because remembrance is not the full story, and certainly not the full story of healing when our memories are bound up in pain. Human beings forget, she said. I would even go as far to say that thank God we forget, because it allows us to get out from under trauma and to create space for new thinking, new ideas. And it's this tension between remembering and forgetting I want to explore with you today. Last week was a special Shabbat, Shabbat HaChodesh. Next Shabbat is a special Shabbat, Shabbat HaGadol. The Shabbat just before Purim was also a special Shabbat. It was Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat of memory. What is this Shabbat then? Nothing. Nothing. It's just Shabbos. And perhaps it feels a bit weird that on this Shabbat between Purim and Pesach, when so much is going on in the Jewish calendar and so much is going on in the Jewish world, we get a regular old Shabbat, a regular Parsha, a regular Haftorah, no special blessing for Rosh Chodesh. And while Micah is no ordinary kid, of course, the regularity of a simcha, of a bar mitzvah, celebrating leaders, honoring yahrzeits, this is the week in, week out work of Jewish community, of consistent practice of meaning making. It's what early to mid 20th century Rabbi Max Kedushin called normal mysticism, everyday religious expressions of our ancient and dynamic heritage. If recently we observe Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat of remembrance, perhaps this Shabbat should be designated Shabbat Shichacha, the Shabbat of forgetting. Do you know what shichacha is? It's a halachic term. It's a legal term. In our Mishnah class, we've been learning from the order of Zra'im, of seeds, which includes numerous tractates dealing with agricultural laws. One of the things that's dealt with within the context of Zra'im is shichacha. You may have heard of the ancient Jewish custom of leket, or gleaning. The basic idea is that the impoverished members of the community would follow behind those harvesting the grain. Any sheaves that fell to the ground are considered shichacha. They are forgotten grain, out of sight, out of mind. They now belong to the poor, to the hungry. There's something powerful, even redemptive, in this process of forgetting. Perhaps that's why the Tanakh has Ruth meeting Boaz during the gleaning. She is collecting forgotten sheaves. Their union is quite literally salvific. David and the further messianic line comes about because of this moment. Remember that exercise that I asked you to do at the beginning. My hope is that in recognizing how often we remember something that we've forgotten, we'll also realize the importance of forgetting and not just remembering. Being in the ordinary is our way of coping with managing the extraordinary, the good and the bad. For example, I can't think of one year in my nearly 20 years of the rabbinate when I've spoken as frequently about one topic, the state of Israel. Whether it was numerous sermons and classes that I gave last spring and summer about the judicial overhaul and Israel's great battle to actualize its stated liberal democratic values, or the countless times I've spoken and taught about life in Israel, the Hamas war, and the diaspora since the traumatic events of October 7th. It's like picking at a scab. I just can't seem to let the wound heal. Because, of course, the wound is infected, and it will take time and medicine for us, this tzara'at that we're all carrying, for Israelis, for Gazan Palestinians, for the Jewish people in this country to return to some true sense of normality. But my friends, we also need breaks. We need forgetting to endure the memories that we collect and catalog in the library of our consciousness. I'm exhausted from talking about Israel. You may be exhausted hearing about it. Okay, I fully recognize the irony of pointing out on this so-called Shabbat of forgetting all the stressful things that we're meant to forget. So perhaps the best way to do so in this very fraught time is not to focus on the ordinary things, because the ordinary in and of themselves, when there are truly difficult, traumatic things happening, are perhaps not enough to snap us out of our remembering and into our forgetting. But instead, maybe we can focus on something. You can eat the candy, it's okay. No, don't eat the candy. Sorry, never parent somebody else's kid. But instead, let's focus on something predictable, yet special and rare. So let me ask you this. How many of you saw the eclipse this week? Excellent. Okay, so who saw the totality? Who traveled somewhere where you were in the path of totality? Also great. We're not going to shame the people who didn't see the totality. But I did, and wow. My family and I were in Columbus, Ohio, where my sister and brother-in-law's family happened to have had both a spare room and backyard furniture where we could stare up at the sky and wonder at what was truly an extraordinary event. We wore our requisite glasses as we watched the moon inch further and further toward the center of the sun. I know that you were able to do so right here in Baltimore, but for those of us who are in the path of totality, here's what happened next. We removed those glasses as the world was awash in a silvery darkness. The sun's corona shone beyond the moon's perimeter. And it was, as has been described, pearls and diamonds and temperature drops animal confusion, although less so where we were. My sister-in-law lives in a newer suburban enclave without a lot of tall trees, so the birds weren't there to do their thing, but I hear that was great in other places. My colleague, Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt of Addis Israel in D.C., wrote this of the total solar eclipse. As I grow older, doubt grows stronger in me about things I used to think of as absolutes. Today's eclipse was a beautiful reminder that even with doubts and uncertainty, there is so much that we share as humans in awe of this enormous universe. I felt we were all part of something today, and I love sharing this moment in community with strangers. In other words, Rabbi Holtzblatt noticed the power of certainty, that in a tumultuous and unpredictable world, there are still things that we can rely on. The moon will continue to revolve around the earth will rotate on its axis and circle the sun, and every once in a while the three will coexist on the same plane, even for a moment, and we, human beings blessed to be at that moment on that particular corner of the globe, can find enormous joy, strength, comfort, inspiration, and community from that completely predictable, yet still incredible sight. For those of you who found a pair of protective glasses and ventured outside this week, or those of you who traveled to Texas or Ohio or upstate New York, I'm curious. When you saw the eclipse, did you say a bracha? So there's a great machloket, there's a great debate about this, you see. The sages of the Talmud suggest that a solar eclipse is actually a bad omen. And we don't say a blessing over evil portents. But the Talmudic discussion doesn't end there. The sages taught in another Baraita, when the sun is eclipsed, it is a bad omen, they say, for other nations, but not for us. Why? Because the Jewish people calculate our holidays based on the moon. A solar eclipse, the Gemara reminds us, is actually about the moon, not the sun. It's the moon which edges in front of the sun, which betters its bigger sibling. Now, lest you think this is a story of Jewish triumphalism, remember, solar eclipses are much rarer to witness than lunar ones, and the sun in the sky is much more common, and of course, no eclipse is infinitely more common than any eclipse, but there is some chizuk, some comfort and strength, I think, in the moon's capacity to block out the sun. After 6 months of feeling so very much like the world is against us, the itty-bitty moon, our moon, had its moment, and we might take some comfort from that. Because in the certainty of this cosmic dance, we also find the predictability of the Jewish calendar, the reliability of our sacred practices, which brings me back to this holy, ordinary Shabbat, nestled between Shabbat HaChodesh and Shabbat HaGadol. In just over a week, we'll be sitting at our Seder tables, remembering a time of our oppression and liberation. It will be a very challenging Passover season. Our hostages are not free. Gazans are not free. The moon and sun may have appeared to exist in one place, but they did not. Physicists tell us that two objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time. True liberation for Israelis, Palestinians, from their overlapping needs and concerns, I suspect, will be an enigma for the foreseeable future. But the Haggadah demands that we not forget for too long. We remember the suffering visited upon us by our enemies at Shvo Chamatcha. We remember the suffering endured by our enemies when we diminish our cups of wine and name the plagues. We invite Elijah the prophet into our dining rooms, hoping this year at last will bring about the promise made by way of Ruth and Boaz's descendants so very long ago. And we remember our personal experience of liberation. Bechol dor vador, we say, Chayav Adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. In each and every generation, every person is obligated to see themselves as if we, each of us, personally left Egypt. The Seder commands memory and empathy by way of it. But I ask you this, Does the Haggadah demand that we only remember? Does this amazing book take into account the wisdom of Israel's head librarian, that forgetting allows us to get out from under the trauma and create space for new thinking and new ideas? Did you know that this line, Bechol Dor Vador, the one I just said, is one of two versions, actually, of the same statement? This is the version from the Ashkenazi Haggadah, but some Sephardi Haggadot have a different version taken from the Rambam. And Maimonides has a slightly different take on the commandment to recall our ancient journey from slavery to freedom. Here's his version. Bechol dor vador chayav adam leharot et atzmo ki'ilu hu be'atzmo yatsa ata mishibud mitzrayim. In every generation, a person must not see, but present oneself as if they have now, personally left slavery in Egypt. And I think we can interpret this one of two ways. One is that we must demonstrate on Pesach the manner in which we were liberated. This is the origin of dressing up at the Seder, of acting out the stories. Anybody do that in your home? Less so, right? Because most of the people here are Ashkenazi Jews if we're Jewish, and that's more common in Sephardi and Mizrahi communities where they read this version, the Rambam's version, where they act out the story, and they'll ask questions in Arabic or in Aramaic about leaving, and they'll beat each other in the head with green onions, one of many wonderful traditions that different families have for Pesach. But another way to read this is that we demonstrate our liberation not only on the Seder night, not through the particular remembering of Pesach, but through the ordinary performance of Jewish traditions. This is Kedushin's normal mysticism. This is Shabbat Shichacha, Shabbat of forgetting between remembrances. We are Jewish, we do Jewish, we exist as free people here in America, there in Israel. The moon moves through the sky every night across the globe. So here's what I did on Monday. I did say a bracha when I saw the eclipse. It wasn't in that moment of prayer for victory or for God to prioritize the needs of one people over another. In that moment, witnessing the dance of the heavenly bodies, I thought only of how vast the universe is, how blessed we are to exist within it, to live, to make a life. I thought of the many ways blessings just fill my entire life. And our children, even when they struggle, are definitely blessings in our lives, mine included. I remember when they were that age. Now my 16-year-old towers above me. Our families, our community, our health, these are real blessings in our lives. And so as I removed my glasses and I stared at the dazzling sky, I uttered the words, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam osei ma'aseh bereshit. Blessed are you, God, who fashions the work of creation. And I remembered the words we chant each morning service, HaMechadesh betuvo b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereshit. In God's goodness, the work of creation is renewed every day. Cause a new light to shine on Zion, and may we all soon be worthy of its illumination. Blessed are you, we say in the Yotzer prayer, creator of the heavenly lights. And that evening, as we moved into the new month of Nisan, I thought of the holy month of Ramadan, which was also coming to an end. Because guess what? Of the three Abrahamic faiths, it is ours and Islam who mark our calendars by the moon. Because actually, we have so very much in common. And I prayed that soon we would know peace, that the war would end. And I was delighted to read stories of shared iftars, small pockets of coexistence in Israel and around the world, where human beings found their way to one another through their pain and against the hateful rhetoric that evil speech that Micah spoke about, that pervades so much of the discourse right now. On that day, I remembered what I have so often forgotten these past 6 months, that pain and fear restrict our capacity to love and learn and grow. And I prayed for a return to something less dramatic, more common, more ordinary, for less darkness, for more light. Shabbat Shalom.